My intention is to help them do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And figuring out what they want to do is sometimes more complicated than just asking. The old saying about don't give them what they ask for, give them what they want. Kid makes my coffee, tattooed neck to feet. My pants up my waist, his are down round his cheeks. To him I'm just old, but that hipster has no clue of the crazy things I've done and the crazy things I'll do. Thank God young folks can't guess what we think. They can't imagine Grandma as a sexy young thing in a little black dress in 1952 with the crazy things she's done and the crazy things she'll do. I was young and handsome and dancing so sweet. Then time played a trick and the joke's on me. I'm on my way to being wrinkled and gray. But let me just say, I feel okay. In my old age, I'm gonna drive around town with the top down. You're looking real cool in my Panama hat and my shiny white shoes for all the crazy things I'm still planning to do. With the crazy things I've done and the crazy things I'll do.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for coming.
Glad to be here.
So you're a guy who does some great songwriting, great performing. You tour around with your wife, and you're an engineer. Why do engineering when you can fill up your time making people smile?
Well, engineering is just one of my skills. Back when I was 12 years old and I started singing and playing with the kids next door, we got a cassette recorder. One of those big ones. I think they got it from the high school. It was
of course.
So it's the size of this tabletop.
Right.
And we would all gather around and sing into it. It had a built-in microphone.
That's engineering totally on the cheap.
It was free.
How did you go from
I was 12.
That? Yeah, well, how did you go from that to the consoles with 1,000 buttons? And why did you go to the consoles with 1,000 buttons?
I started really getting into recording. And so I started working with the cheap tape recorders I had at home and making albums.
Yeah.
Which meant eventually you wind up with a cassette, and then I would build a cardboard cover for it and put my picture on it.
Of course.
Paste it on with a... That was my album. I had one copy. So it just sort of... I started taking a class at a local studio. Now I'm 18 or 20 or something. And they were showing us the difference between different microphones and stuff. And then I got a letter. No, I wrote a letter to this kid who I knew in high school, Gordon Hookalo. And he was the local AV geek in high school. And I wrote him a letter, I don't know, to his parents' house, and he'd moved out. By now he was in his 20s. And it was like, I want to be a recording engineer. I want to live in the studio and sleep under the piano. And he picked it up like 7 months later from his parents' house. And he phoned me. And he was working at the studio out in Revere, Massachusetts. And they actually needed somebody.
Really?
They started out paying me $5 an hour.
Well, what did they have you doing when you were starting?
That was the thing. I was thrown into the... they wouldn't even tell me. 7 o'clock on Friday, show up.
Right.
It's a rock band this night. The next night it was a classical pianist.
Yeah.
And the next night it would be something else. But it was a lot of rock and roll bands, hair bands. Uh, Sometimes it would be a folk musician with a guitar. But what I realized, and this is how I got into producing as opposed to engineering, because I really do as much producing as engineering, I felt like the music and the projects would go a lot better if I knew something about what it was before I showed up. So
Yeah.
I started telephoning them. I'd ask for the name of the client, and I'd telephone them, and we'd talk, and I'd find out what it was, and then we'd come in more prepared.
Mentally, you mean? Because you're still pushing
Putting-
the same buttons. You're still setting up the
Setting up
mics
for a
in the
rock
same way.
band is different from setting up for a classical pianist, obviously. But I was still doing the music stuff and still writing and singing and hoping to become rich and famous. And I managed to achieve neither of those things. But
rich-ish and famous-ish.
I got really good.
Ah,
And I did wind up playing and singing on some people's CDs.
yeah.
But mostly that wasn't the thing.
Well-
Mostly it was, I was getting experience with all kinds of music.
Well, I've heard you play. I mean, you put on a great show. So, putting on someone else's show in a studio, how much of yourself do you bring into that?
A little
Kinda
too much
craft.
for some people.
I was wondering, because
Yeah.
that can be an ego thing, or a clash of egos when you're in a studio and you have a certain idea how it should go and they disagree.
My intention is to help them do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And figuring out what they want to do is sometimes more complicated than just asking. The old saying about don't give them what they ask for, give them what they want.
Right.
So a lot of
Or
these
it's-
people are not that experienced, so you have to help, you have to interpret what they want. Does this make sense?
Oh, I'm a writer, and what they say about editors is you want to get out of the way of good stories and get in the way of bad ones. So if you're an engineer, you want to get in the way of bad ideas and get out of the way of the good ones when they're happening.
Yeah, so you asked how much I was into it. I was invested in having it come out well. And so in the service of that, and hopefully only in the service of that, not the service of my ego, I would try my best to understand what was going to happen, identify the strengths and weaknesses of the project. And I actually offer workshops on this now at the Freight and Salvage and at the San Francisco Free Folk Festival about how to be the producer of your own project. Yeah. Because a lot of people don't realize that a producer is not just Phil Ramone. He's not a star. If there's nobody in the room to produce your project with you, you're the project manager.
Right.
You're the producer.
Right.
And once you accept that, you have to start thinking strategically about what your project means.
Well, having done that, does that, I would imagine that might make you appreciate the dynamic of having a producer help you think with you about how you're doing what you're doing.
Sure, absolutely.
And which one do you like being? Do you like being the one who's producing your own things so you have absolute control, or do you like being a producer who is helping someone else achieve their potential in the recording?
Well, I don't think I like either one better. They each have their own uses. Yeah. I find that a lot of the people that call me and want to make a record, a CD, what do they call them now? A file.
Yeah.
They want to make a music file. They, as I'm talking with them on the phone about the project, and I start to get a glimpse of what their level of experience is at it. Mm-hmm. And the more experience they have, the more I back off and listen and check out what they're about and try to just act as a support. And if they sound like they're beginners, and often they just come out and ask me, they say, I heard you really helped with so-and-so. I would love your input on my plan. Mm-hmm. And so I would help. When it's my music, I have not found very many people that I want to let into the club.
The one-man club?
I should be more trusting.
Well, there are different ways to shape your sonic presentation on it. Some people like more guitar in it. Some people like more voice.
Oh, you're just talking about balance.
Absolutely. Well, the balance and the quality of it. No two people approach music the same, I would think. So how do you thread that, especially in your own one-man club, now one-man, one-woman club?
lately the focus of my own music has
Mm-hmm.
been, it used to be, if you go back 30 years, I was doing big studio productions with doubling the horns with a synthesizer and
Yeah.
extra drums and then an overdub of a tambourine in the chorus. And now I guess I'm getting tired.
Ah,
Actually, I'm
so.
focusing in. I'm trying to do less with more. I mean, more with less. And
Uh-huh.
so, since we perform with one guitar and two voices, when we make a recording, I try to stay focused on how much can we do with just a small palette.
That's interesting. I know a lot of people, myself included. I notice when I do recordings, I have so much less of the support instruments in it because I like the voice and the guitar, voices and the guitar. Is that really lazy, or is that
I'm joking. It's
ref-
not lazy. It's very hard to
yeah?
do a lot with a little.
Mm-hmm.
When I go see a comic or something else, I love to see somebody stand up there with as few props as possible. What can they do with just their body and their hands and their voice? When I go to see a folk artist perform at a live show, I love the ones where they're just, if it's songwriter and guitarist, I want to see them get out and do it by themselves.
Yeah.
I want to hear this person do their thing as close to naked as possible.
Now, if you were, as an engineer though, and as a singer-songwriter, you would think that layering things on because you know how to layer things on would be more interesting and fun than just recording a single guitar and a single voice with maybe some harmony. What what makes you not want to do the layering because layering is fun?
Well, this is getting more technical. Let me think if I can do this a different way. Lately, the last
Yeah.
25 years, my music recording career has shifted over to doing classical music. And
Yeah.
they never overdub anything. There may be 100 players and a choir out there, but it all happens at once. It's an event.
And those are very tightly knit layers, but they're all.
It all happens at
Yeah.
once. There's none of this back up and now we'll lay on the kettle drums
Uh-huh.
or now we're going to lay on the bass part. And I've become, in a very similar way to just having one guy play and sing,
Yeah.
a jazz group, maybe five guys playing, but once again, they're interactive. It's
Mm-hmm.
not this laying on top of. Everything is happening at once. It's an emotional event. And this is what
It's an
happens when you're
emotional event.
there.
No.
I think that's the key. If you have a guitar player who sings and plays live, that's how I want to see them play in the studio. If you get the guitar and then you lay the vocal on later, you're
Mm.
subtracting out the emotion that they're used to producing when they play for an audience.
Yeah.
So it's about capturing emotion. People are so stuck on not making mistakes in the studio. They want to produce a mistake-free recording. But what the audience responds to is emotion.
Yeah.
You don't have to play well. I mean, it's nice. But we all know musicians that touch the audience without any necessity for technical proficiency. It's about emotion. People want to have a feeling, and that's what the arts are about.
Now that's interesting coming from you because you are a very precise player. Um, there's not, you don't do any fumbling and bad notes.
Excuse me.
Yeah, but how much does your own precision inform how you then listen to someone else? How can you be so precise and then listen to something that's a little off, but it's genuine for that particular artist?
I try to listen for the emotion.
Yeah.
You're a writer, and if you are reading somebody's piece and you see technical problems with it, it may detract from your ability to soak up the actual information that they're trying to impart.
Oh, there are two different ways of reading, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You can read as an editor, or you can read as someone who is consuming the message.
Right.
And it sounds like a similarity there.
Because I understand the craft pretty well, I need to work harder to avoid thinking that way when I'm trying to understand what it is that makes somebody who's playing out of tune, looks like they're drunk, won't stand in the right spot on the stage, all these things. But somehow, if they are touching people,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is a very special quality, and this is what artists go for. Yeah, everybody wants to sing technically well or play technically well, but this other X factor is, I believe, what most audience members want to see. They're not into some cerebral thing. It may take years to learn how to play piano like that. But in the end, if the person goes out and just plays perfectly, but somehow does not connect with the audience, it's probably because they're thinking about playing perfectly instead of trying to put across the emotion this piece means.
It's like the Itzhak Perlman thing, went to China. You know, they were playing perfectly, technically correctly, but with no feeling. And he had to teach them how to have feeling. Does the engineering and then your getting both below and above the engineering, I guess, matrix of thought, does that inform how you perform then? Did it change the way that you performed?
You know, I've been performing since I was 12 years old. But when I was around 26, I stopped performing and went into the studio twice as hard as before.
Mm-hmm.
I actually stopped playing. I had some problems with my shoulder. And then when I got back into it around 2000, I decided to devote myself to the performance thing. Because I knew all about how to make a record, but I did not know what this X factor was of how to put together an act and how to take an audience and lead them on a path.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't understand. I knew all about what the record was, but then there was this other thing. And so that's been my study for the last 15 years or so.
Yeah. They are two very different disciplines. Do you like one better than the other?
I did one for a long time, and now it still exists, of course, but now I'm trying to learn a new skill. They're both important. I don't like one better than the other, but I'm adding to my skill set. For years, I did not do the performing thing, but now I'm learning this other skill, and it's fascinating. And I understand the musicians that come in and perform in the studio better now, because I understand what they're doing when they're not making a record. They're trying to connect with an audience, and that's a different skill.
Yeah, again, it's like writing. If you edit, you become a better writer. You writer, you become a better editor.
But then there's a whole nother set of skills, which is how do you get this stuff in front of people?
Yeah, how do you sell it?
Yeah, because how do you bring people to it?
And that also makes you think about how you're doing what you do, how you're practicing the craft and presenting it so that you can then think about how to sell it.
One of the things that I've noticed with myself is that because I play relatively complex guitar parts, I was at a songwriter's or a performance workshop, and I did that exact song, The Crazy Things I've Done.
Yeah.
And the woman who was running the workshop heard it, and then she said, here's the thing. She said, when you're singing and playing, your first instrument is your voice.
Yeah.
She saw that I was getting lost in the guitar part. I was more trying to play the guitar part well than I was paying attention to the performance aspect.
The precision versus the emotion coming out.
So since then, I practiced and worked on the guitar so that I could do that in my sleep. And then I started thinking, what's this character singing about? And that's one of the things that I've discovered I want to do in the act that we're doing, is the song is about how older, more experienced people are often ignored by the young.
Yeah.
Because they're not as pretty as they were, and they figure these old people are fuddy-duddies, but almost everybody who is 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, as a matter of fact, I'll say 100% of the people that are 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 were once 20 and 35.
And you remember it too.
And you remember it. And there's all these things that you do then that a young person can look at an older person sitting and having a cup of coffee at the cafe, and they have to stop and think that this older person doesn't look like one of them, but he is.
Yeah, you're a set of layers walking around.
Layers. Yeah. So a lot of the songs that Cindy and I present now are about that arc, about the fact that this child who was, is now a hefty bearded gentleman wearing a hat and walking down the street. He was once a little baby,
of course.
And so I find that incredibly poignant, and I try to communicate it in the songs.
Well, you do it very well, and thanks for coming today. I appreciate it, Mark.
My appreciation to you.
Mars. Yeah, I think I'd like to try me out a life in the stars. My friends all say I need a place to air out my heart, so I'm moving to Mars. You know, this life has been crazy. Sometimes I think I'm not really here. Every time I turn around, another friend is going down, and I can't see her face for the tears. So I'm moving to Mars. Yeah, I think I'd like to try me out